On today's episode, everything you need to know as the Blackhawks take on the Sabres.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, please make sure you go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well. Mailbag Monday is right around the corner, so make sure to hit me with your Blackhawks-related question. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. I'm really close to reaching my goal of 2,000 subscribers, so even if you're someone who regularly listens through an audio platform, make sure to jump on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button for me. And last but certainly not least, got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. If you're not already a member, got to check out FanDuel.com right now to win $250 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Blackhawks return to action following the holiday break tonight out in Buffalo, facing off with the Sabres. This is the second and final meeting between these two teams this season, with the first resulting in a 4-2 win for the Sabres way back on October 19th. Earlier on in the season. I actually do recall the Blackhawks playing really well in that game, but just happened to get UPL'd. But ever since then, it has been some tough sledding for the Buffalo Sabres. They currently sit dead last in the Eastern Conference with 28 points, just 2 points ahead of the Blackhawks, who, as we know, sadly are in last place once again. And for the Sabres, an absolute brutal month of December. They actually just picked up their first win of the month on Monday in their final game before the holiday break against the New York Islanders. That snapped a 13-game losing skid, stretching all the way back to the end of Thanksgiving. So yeah, has not been pretty for this Buffalo Sabres team. Would love to see the Blackhawks get back on track here tonight after a pair of kind of tough losses, back-to-back losses leading up to the holiday break after they had won 3 in a row for the first time since February 2023. As far as what we could see out of the Blackhawks lineup, I'm recording this prior to the morning skate. I'm assuming the Blackhawks are going to have a morning skate since they've been off for a couple of days here, but I wouldn't anticipate Anders Sorensen, at least personally, making any changes really, despite the Blackhawks losing 2 games in a row prior to the Christmas break, because things have been going pretty well. The tinkering that he had done was in the top 6. He had moved up Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi to the top line with Connor Bedard and sent Nick Foligno and Ryan Donato down to the second line with Frank Nazar. I'd expect to see that out of the gate tonight in Buffalo. Hall, Bedard, and Bertuzzi remaining as the top line. That's a trio that I personally really like to see. And then giving Frank Nazar a veteran like Nick Foligno, who of course last season helped in the development of Connor Bedard. I think that was a really smart idea. And Ryan Donato, someone who can also win some puck battles along the boards to give Frank Nazar more puck touches, and also just plays such a simplified game and has found success doing that this year. So I'd anticipate to see Foligno, Nazar, and Donato as the second line once again, leaving Teuvo Teravainen, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev as the third pairing. Mikheyev and Teravainen both sadly had their point streak snapped in the last game prior to the break, but obviously we're on a torrid streak prior to that. And then rounding things out with the fourth line, Pat Maroon, Lucas Reichel, and Joey Anderson. Craig Smith, I don't think is expected to be back from a back injury. As I mentioned, though, I am recording this prior to the morning skate, so nothing official on that, but I feel like we'd probably have some indication that he'd be ready to return off injured reserve. So I'd expect to see Joey Anderson on the fourth line once again, leaving Philip Kurashev as the healthy scratch. Just with the Blackhawks finally starting to find some mojo and actually establishing some solidity in their forward lines for the first time this year, just leaving Philip Kurashev as the odd man out. I do wonder, though, with, Craig Smith potentially missing more time here, Joey Anderson isn't someone who absolutely has to be in the lineup. I do wonder if Anders Sorensen gives Philip Kurashev an opportunity on the fourth line with Lucas Reichel and Pat Maroon, because Reichel showed some good chemistry with Smith, and I think a lot of that was because those two both play the same style in terms of they like to use their speed. I thought they established good chemistry with one another in that department, and off the rush, Philip Kurashev can play a speedy offensive style of game as well. So I wonder if that could get him back on the fourth line tonight potentially. Defensively for the Blackhawks, I do think there's a chance we see Alex Vlasic reunite with Seth Jones on the top D pairing, something that I've talked about in the last couple of episodes. If whether Sorensen will reunite that true top pairing that we saw last year with one another. A reason I think that is because Nolan Allen and Connor Murphy have done a lot of good things together this season. So by having Vlasic and Jones play with one another, that would allow Allen to reunite with Connor Murphy, and then he could also just leave Kevin Korchinski and TJ Brody alone as the third pairing. Expect what Louis Crevier, not Wyatt Kaiser. He's obviously in Rockford. Expect Louis Crevier to be serving as the seventh defenseman here tonight, and we should get an update on Wyatt Kaiser, I'd figure, once the Blackhawks return home from this game before their tilt on Sunday at the United Center against the Dallas Stars. I'd anticipate Peter Mrazek is the one who's going to get his start. It would be his 22nd start of the season. Arvid Soderblom got to go in the last game prior to the break, so I guess that Peter Mrazek is going to get the start in between the pipes for the Blackhawks tonight at the KeyBank Center. As far as what we can expect to see out of the Buffalo Sabres, well, first, actually, let's dive into some of their numbers. They're 1-7-2 over their last 10 games. On the power play, they're 29th in the NHL. On the penalty kill, they're 24th. At the faceoff dot, they're 24th as well. And I should note, the Blackhawks obviously have struggled at the dot mightily throughout the course of this season. They actually have handled their own over the last two games. They, believe it or not, won the face-off battle last Saturday in Calgary, and then they actually went 50% in their last game as well. So hopefully they're starting to get some good mojo at the dot. Certainly would help this team offensively to have more puck touches and maybe win some more key offensive zone draws to help them put the puck in the back of the net. But the Sabres are 24th in the NHL at the faceoff dot this year, so a good opportunity for the Blackhawks to have another successful night at the draw. And then in terms of goals for per game, the Sabres are 19th in the NHL. Goals against per game, they're 27th. So it's been a struggle for them in all categories this year. Again, why I think it's a good opportunity for the Blackhawks to get back in the W column. I'm recording this before the Sabres have their morning skate as well, so just a little bit of a rough estimate in terms of what their forward lines and deep pairings could look like. But this is what Puckpedia had told me what we can expect for this evening. Jason Zucker, Tage Thompson, and Alex Tuck as the top line. JJ Peterka, Dylan Cousins, and Jack Quinn as the second line. I've covered numerous Dylan Cousin rumors this season here on Locked On Blackhawks and talked about whether the Blackhawks should pursue him or not. They'll get a little bit of a preview at what he's been for the Sabres so far this season here tonight in Buffalo. Ultimately, I don't think the Blackhawks have the means or will really want to make that type of trade, considering what Dylan Cousins is going to get paid until the 2030 season. But a good opportunity for the Blackhawks front office, should they have more interest in Dylan Cousins than I expect they do. Good little opportunity to get a trial run at what he's looking like here tonight. Third line is Peyton Krebs. Is it JJ Kulik? Yuri Kulik, JJ Peterka, Yuri Kulik. Glad I figured that out on the fly. I didn't want to butcher that. Peyton Krebs, Yuri Kulik, Zach Benson as kind of the young third line for the Sabres. And then Beck Mallinston, Ryan McLeod, and Blackhawks legend Sam Lafferty were expected to round things out on the fourth line for the Sabres. Defensively, the young duo of Rasmus Dahlin and Bowen Byram. Dahlin, the first overall pick in his draft. Byram, the fourth overall selection in 2019 as the top pairing. Samuelson and Owen Power as the second pairing. And then Jacob Bryson and Connor Clifton as the third pairing. Although I do wonder if Henry Jokiharju could draw into the lineup tonight, facing off against the team that drafted him in the first round back in 2018. In goal, obviously not confirmed. I'd expect to see UPL. He's kind of the driving force of this Sabres team. Had good success against this Blackhawks squad earlier on in the season, as I mentioned. So there's what we can expect out of the Blackhawks and Sabres lineup when these two teams face off at 6 p.m. Central Time here tonight. By the way, this game is going to be broadcasted on ESPN2. So Blackhawks fans all over, you'll be able to tune into this high-octane matchup between the lowly Blackhawks and Buffalo Sabres. Hey, better than nothing, I guess, Blackhawks fans. But there is a preview of tonight's matchup with the Sabres. Don't forget that it starts at 6 o'clock Central Time, not the regular 7 or 7:30 regular puck drop. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, I'll go over my 3 keys to victory for the Blackhawks in Buffalo, as well as my best bets. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about Prize Picks. If you love sports, then you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to now turn your sports knowledge into real money. Because whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to now get in on the action. And you can win up to 1,000 times your money now with Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away more than $30 million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in the month of December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it so easy to cash out. You can now get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. And this week, I'm looking at Connor Bedard to record more than 4 shots on goal against the Buffalo Sabres, and Taylor Hall to record more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make my picks and have fun with my friends while potentially cashing out fast. To join in on the fun, go and download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps when you download the Prize Picks app to get a free $50 when you play your first $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Segment 2, getting into my 3 keys to victory for the Blackhawks as they return to action tonight and hope to get back on track against this lowly and struggling Buffalo Sabres bunch. My first key to victory, Blackhawks fans, is when you smell blood, you go and hunt. And this is something I'll never forget when I was like 12 or 13 years old, kind of random here, Blackhawks fans. I remember being up probably a handful of runs playing Little League Baseball, like 12 or 13 years old, being on the mound, playing against a team that we were much better than. They had no business being in the same game as us. No business having this game being close. And I'm not saying that should be the case between the Blackhawks and Sabres tonight, but what I'm saying is I remember giving up a couple runs. We weren't exactly on top of our game. We were maybe taking them for granted a little bit. And I had a coach come out to the pitching mound and, we're still up a couple of runs. In my mind, we're doing good. And he starts chewing at me and the rest of the team being like, hey, when you smell blood, you go and finish these guys off. And for this Blackhawks team, when you smell blood and you smell a lowly and down Buffalo Sabres team, and that's a familiar feeling, that's a familiar narrative and energy that's been around this Blackhawks team for quite a while. I personally think it's different now, even though they've still lost 5 of 9 games under Anders Sorensen. It just looks and feels so much different if you've been watching them on a nightly basis from the start of the season. This just feels like an opportunity, a really good chance for the Blackhawks to get back on track, to say it again, and to get back in the W column here tonight to right the ship and get to 500 under Anders Sorensen. And I'm not expecting the Blackhawks to make a climb for the postseason or anything, but the Western Conference standings are fairly close, and I think there's a chance for them to go on a little bit of a stretch here. They have a ton of games at home in the month of January. Go on a little bit of a run and get out of the absolute bottom of the Western Conference standings. And I think it's a good chance to start that run here tonight in Buffalo. Be relentless, be on the attack, be strong on the forecheck, cause havoc like we like to do out there when we're at our best. I think if they play to that style, they're going to have success and come away with 2 points tonight in Buffalo. My second key to victory is no selective shooting. The Blackhawks got to be aggressive, got to be assertive in the offensive zone. Take the Ryan Donato strategy, for crying out loud. Just put pucks on net as frequent as possible, and good things happen. Ryan Donato still the leading goal scorer for this Blackhawks team with 11 goals this year. 10 of them have come on the road, so maybe a good opportunity for Ryan Donato to get back in the goal column here tonight. But I think the biggest mistake the Blackhawks could make is to let UPL only make 20 saves and have a goalie victory for the Sabres here tonight, kind of like he did in the first meeting. The Blackhawks cannot afford to be choosy and make the pretty play, especially if you're their prime shooter like Connor Bedard. He's been better in the goal scoring department recently, of course, but I still think he can be more aggressive and call his own number more frequently. Kid, you're the best goal scorer on this team. No one's going to be mad if you're a little bit more choosy for yourself, a little bit more selfish, and shoot the puck in more opportunities. I think there's still more chances for Connor Bedard to rifle the biscuit on Cage. So don't be choosy tonight. Be aggressive, put pucks on Cage, crash the net, traffic, jump on rebounds. Good things will happen. Don't let, like I said, UPL make 20-21 stops and get Buffalo their second consecutive win for the first time in quite a while, I'm sure. Third key to victory for the Blackhawks tonight is to have clean and crisp outlet passes out of the defensive zone. Do not shoot yourself in the foot with bad giveaways and bad turnovers in transition. If you play a clean game out of your D zone, that will allow you to have success in transition, which is a success of this team. And now that they have a little bit more freedom to go and do that on the offensive side of things, it's no surprise they're putting up better results. If you take care of business and have those clean exit passes, chances are you're going to win this game. If you have bad turnovers, you're sloppy out of the D zone, you give Sabres odd man rushes and second and third chances in the Blackhawks D zone, then bad things are going to happen. So it starts in your own end in transition, as Darren Pang always emphasizes. Make good outlet passes, take care of business. Blackhawks are going to come away with 2 points here tonight. As far as best bets, I know this is something that I haven't featured on the show here recently, and honestly, Blackhawks fans, there's just been so much going on a day-to-day basis for me to cover that I just haven't really had time to squeeze it in. But with us having a couple of days off, I've covered the World Juniors. I'm going to get into some interesting analytics that I definitely wanted to bring up on the show here in just a moment. Had some time to squeeze in a best bets segment again on today's episode. Blackhawks plus 146 underdogs on the road tonight in Buffalo. I know they've dropped 2 in a row, but that feels like a really good line for what this Buffalo Sabres team has been up to in the last month or so. Sabres are minus 176, which I think is an unbettable line in my opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised if that Blackhawks number gets down to like plus 130 or plus 135 by the time the puck drops this evening. Blackhawks plus 1.5, minus 178. That's a much better bet in my opinion than Sabres money line minus 176. Blackhawks, Sabres minus 1.5 is plus 144. The over-under is currently listed at 5.5. Over 5.5 is minus 140. Under 5.5 is plus 114. Looking at the past history between these two foes, Blackhawks are 4-4-2 in the last 10 matchups since the start of 2019. 6 of those 10 games have gone over 5.5. Looking at the goal scorers listed for tonight's game, Tage Thompson is the favorite at plus 150. Connor Bedard next up at plus 230. JJ Peterka plus 230. Tuck at plus 240. Zucker plus 260. Cousins plus 290. Quinn plus 310. Donato plus 340. Teravainen plus 340. Rasmus Dahlin plus 350. Foligno plus 360. Zach Benson plus 370. Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi plus 370 while playing on the top line with Connor Bedard. Frank Nazar plus 400. Ilya Mikheyev plus 410. A lot of good odds for Blackhawks goal scorers tonight is what I will say. And I think just a lot of good odds for this game in general. I'm not, and I do not claim to be ever a hockey sharp. I personally think my best stuff is with golf. If anyone has interest in that, make sure to check out at Jack Bushman 2 on X. But since I've done this best bets segment on the show, I quite honestly think this is like the most tempting amount of lines I've seen in a single game for the Blackhawks this year. I think this is a game in which you can make money on. And I'm not just saying that as like part of an ad read or something. Like, I'm tempted to have like 3 or 4 plays tonight because I think there are just some crazy lines out there. First off, the Hawks just in general at plus 146, I think is really generous. Bertuzzi, anytime goal at plus 370. Same with Taylor Hall, and they're playing on the top line. I know they didn't cash in last game together, but I don't know. I think that's a really good opportunity to make money in a lot of different ways. And some of these lines that I have cooked up, I think are really good, and I think you guys should tail out there. Tyler Bertuzzi, anytime goal scorer, and 2 shots on goal is plus 416. I think that's a really good line. Ilya Mikheyev to keep it rolling, anytime goal scorer plus Hawks money line is plus 707. Here's one I really like as well. Ryan Donato still playing in the top 6 on the second line. Foligno, Nazar, Donato was the Blackhawks' best line in their last game. Ryan Donato to have 4 shots on goal and the Blackhawks to win, that's plus 1045. That's crazy odds to me. Donato, someone who I've mentioned so many times on the show this year, like every time he gets the puck in the offensive zone, if he's down low, he's trying to drive it to the net. If he's from around the dots, he's putting it on net. Guy puts the puck on net. Him to have 4 shots and the Hawks to win this game tonight is plus 1045. That's one of my favorite lines I've seen in a long, long time. Mikheyev, anytime goal scorer and Hawks money line, I think is a little bit risky. But plus 707 is really good odds. And then Bertuzzi, anytime goal scorer and only to have 2 shots on goal is up over plus 400 at plus 416. Really good lines there. I mentioned Hawks in general. If you just wanted to take that, plus 146 tonight is a really good line. And again, I don't claim to be a hockey sharp or the best in the business at this stuff, but feels like a potential money-making opportunity tonight. Let me know in the comment section down below if you feel the same way or what you're going to be betting this evening when the Blackhawks take on the Buffalo Sabres. But that takes care of everything that I wanted to bring up before the puck drops tonight in Buffalo. Before I wrap things up, I do still have to go over some interesting statistics courtesy of the folks over at MoneyPuck. But first, I do need to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the regular season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And FanDuel now has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Personally, I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. But FanDuel also has bets for player props, money lines, game specials, and much, much more. To take advantage of this amazing offer before Week 18 closes, go and visit FanDuel.com right now. Again, that's FanDuel.com to have a chance to win $250 in bonus bets simply if your first $5 bet wins. So go and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just wanted to say thank you for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey down in the description of this video, or you can, simply search on YouTube or wherever, another one, oh boy, this could be an issue, or wherever you may be listening to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With hiccups happening, gonna take a quick sip of water. Pardon me. Segment 3, before I close out the show here today, I wanted to share some stats courtesy of MoneyPuck on the best forward lines and defensive pairings for the Blackhawks here so far this season. And while things have been better here recently since Anders Sorensen has taken over as the interim coach, it looks like there's finally some chemistry being established in the forward group and defensive pairings. Still, there hasn't really even been anything established up front or on the back end between one single pairing, one single line, whether it's due to injury, whether it's due to changing things up. things becoming stale or whatnot. There's many different reasons for that, but it's still been a little bit of a revolving door all over the place for the Blackhawks this year. But I did want to talk about what the analytics say have been the best and most consistent trios and duos for the Blackhawks so far this year. We'll start off with the forwards in terms of goals for. And by the way, this is with a minimum of 50 minutes with one another of a sample size, just to have a little bit better of an understanding. If you have a smaller sample size, there's obviously a bunch of different trios that have been rolled out there for, 5 to 10 minutes. We don't want those involved in the data here. We want the actual pairings and duos, pairings and trios that have seen a good amount of time with one another. In terms of goals for, the best line for the Blackhawks this year has been Ryan Donato, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev. They've been on the ice for 3 goals for to 0 against. Not the greatest sample size in terms of time on ice together, but I did think that was interesting. Would not have expected that they would, be at the top. But again, it's only 3 goals to none. And not the biggest amount of sample size. But at the same point in time, with the Blackhawks having this revolving door all over the place, there's not a ton of high quantity numbers between one single line. The amount of the line that has the most amount of time spent with each other this year is easily Pat Maroon, Lucas Reichel, and Craig Smith, Everyone else has been a little bit jumbled up with one another. That is actually the second line in terms of goals for the Blackhawks. Maroon, Reichel, and Smith at 66.7%, 6 goals for to 3 against. Unfortunate that Craig Smith has been out for the last stretch of games here. Next up is Taylor Hall, Connor Bedard, and Tyler Bertuzzi at 62.5%, 5 goals for to 3 goals against. They don't have the largest sample size with one another this year because for whatever reason, Luke Richardson was so reluctant to put Tyler Bertuzzi with Connor Bedard, which just made no sense whatsoever. Well, actually, from Luke Richardson's perspective, Bedard and Bertuzzi were probably both too big of defensive liabilities to play with one another. But guess what? We need to have offensive success. We need to have Connor Bedard developing. You got to have Tyler Bertuzzi with him. I think that's what he was brought in to do and why he signed on the deal that he signed on with, is to have success with Connor Bedard. Like to see those guys having the numbers that they have this year, 62.5% goals for ratio. Hope that success carries over and they kind of establish some good chemistry and remain with one another for a good stretch of games moving forward. And then after that, it's the Teravainen, Dickinson, Mikheyev line that I anticipate is going to be the third line again tonight for the Blackhawks. 57.1 goals for percentage, 4 goals for to 3 against. Again, haven't been together for the greatest amount of sample size, but we've seen a lot of good things out of them when they have been together. We'll see if Tavo winds up getting a promotion to the top line. I think that'll be determined by how well Bedard fares with Hall and Bertuzzi, but if that goes well, I anticipate Sorensen will let Teravainen remain with Dickinson and Mikheyev as the third line. And then moving on to expected goals for, still looking at forward lines for the Blackhawks. The top forward line for them in terms of expected goals for this year has been Teuvo Teravainen, Nick Foligno, and Connor Bedard, which began the season as the top line. And again, I think is another good reason why Nick Foligno should be playing with Frank Nazar. Not only is he the center for Bedard played as the center. Foligno was the one taking the draws. Not only was he there with Bedard at the beginning of the season, that trio has some good analytics together, but now Foligno is with Frank Nazar as well. Just another good reason for him to be down on that second line with Frank Nazar. Foligno is also involved in the second best line for the Blackhawks in terms of expected goals for. Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, and Tyler Bertuzzi. Hall and Bertuzzi have worked well with one another all season long. Like them to be either with Nazar if he's up in the NHL or with Connor Bedard. Taylor Hall, Connor Bedard, and Tyler Bertuzzi is third in expected goals for as well, while the Reichel, Maroon, and Smith trio is fourth in expected goals for at 48.9%. Looking at the most effective defensive pairings for the Blackhawks this year, and this is a good reminder again why analytics aren't the end-all be-all. They just help tell a bigger story. TJ Brody and Wyatt Kaiser have been the most effective D pairing for the Blackhawks this year in terms of expected goals for. If you've watched the Blackhawks all year long, like I have, and I know a lot of my viewers and listeners have, then you know TJ Brody has not been the best or even among the best two defensemen for the Blackhawks this year. Now, what these analytics tell us is, yeah, he is capable of horrible blunders in the defensive zone, but he's also probably not as bad as we've been knocking him for. He also probably isn't as good as these analytics suggest. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. But interesting to see Brody and Kaiser at 52.1% of the expected goals for. Brody and Vlasic also second at 50.7%. Vlasic and Jones next up at 50%. Another reason why I would like to see Alex Vlasic and Seth Jones reunite. They've had good success with one another. Alec Martinez and Wyatt Kaiser next up at 49.1%. And then Jones and Kaiser after that at 48.9%. Wyatt Kaiser, the analytics really, really like him. I personally liked what I saw out of him based on the eye test. Hope to see him back up in the NHL sometime soon, but might be easier said than done with the Blackhawks getting healthier on the blue line. And then in terms of goals for, the best D pairings for the Blackhawks, the Murphy-Allen pairing has been the best for them, and a really big sample size too, 152 minutes with a 66.7 goals for ratio, 6 goals for to 3 against. Another reason why I think Sorensen should go back to Vlasic Jones. You could reunite Murphy-Allen, have Korchinski Brody round things out. Brody and Vlasic are next at 60%, 3 goals for to 2 goals against. Not a huge sample size with 80 minutes. Decent sample size, but not the biggest. Martinez Kaiser after that, 60%, 3 goals for to 2 against in 58 minutes. And then Murphy and Kaiser after that at 60%, 3 goals for to 2 against as well in 97 minutes of action. But there are some interesting forward line and defensive pairings analytics for the Blackhawks. Up front, what the Blackhawks have right now, if that works well, I think that's what I would continue to work with. The only gripe that I have is just getting Lucas Reichel a bigger opportunity. I would like to see him play with Ryan Donato, get more opportunities on the top power play unit, or even get Philip Kurashev down there on the fourth line to get him back in the lineup and maybe give him a spark. Lucas Reichel with his speed can continue to help this forward group defensively. I just want to see Vlasic and Jones reunite and become the true anchor of this blue line. Allen and Murphy clearly in a good sample size this year have shown good chemistry with one another. I think it would be smart to have them reunite as the second D pairing. That's kind of what some of the analytics told me here today. Hopefully things go well tonight with the Hall, Bedard, Bertuzzi line. I really think that could be the top line the rest of the way for the Blackhawks. Best of luck to them tonight against the Sabres. Hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and has a great start to their weekend. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcasts, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at Jack Bushman2. And be sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, go Hawks. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.